Hey everybody, in this episode of the Dr. Mike Show, we're going to delve into what natural means, and if a food or a product contains natural ingredients or is all natural, does that really make a difference? When and why? All right, so I had this idea for today's show a couple days ago when I was watching TV with my kids. We were watching a lacrosse game, and these commercials came on. And it was advertising some energy drink, and it was talking about how it had natural caffeine. It was an all-natural source of energy. And then one of my children said to me, he said, "Well, Dad, is natural caffeine better than unnatural caffeine?" And as a caffeine lover, I was like, "There's no such thing as unnatural caffeine." But no, it got me thinking, because that's become such a popular thing that we see in food marketing now and in products, is that it'll say that it contains a natural source of energy, or all natural caffeine, or clean caffeine, or a natural source of clean caffeine, any of those things. And you have to wonder, like, does that mean it's actually better? Because calling it out like that makes it seem like it would be better. And there was actually a survey that was done in 2018 where people were asked, is a product containing natural caffeine going to be more effective than one that contained synthetic caffeine? And what was really interesting was about 50% of the people had no idea. And then the people who said, there was about half of the rest of the people said yes, and half said no. So 25% think it does, 25% think it doesn't, and 50% don't know what it is, right? And so that was really interesting to me, because the market is really pushing this idea of natural caffeine. Now, as a avid neurocoffee and coffee drinker, right, this is a natural source of caffeine. I'm a big fan of that, but I would consider myself also an equal opportunity caffeine consumer. And part of the reason is because whether caffeine is natural or synthetic, it actually doesn't make a difference. So synthetic caffeine generally comes from urea that's then reacted with two other compounds, methyl acetate and something else, which is escaping me at the moment, right? But it's this chemical reaction, forms caffeine. And generally what's going to happen when you get something like that, so another example would be creatine. Like, most creatine is synthetically produced. But when you do that, you generally are going to get a really, really pure product, right? Because it's going to be refined and it's going to be isolated and there's going to be nothing else, just the compound that you want, like in the case of synthetic caffeine or creatine. When you go the natural route, right, natural caffeine is going to come from cacao, so from like the bean that makes chocolate, coffee beans, or even tea leaves, right? And so sometimes, depending on the level of purification and that you're getting with those products, it could be just caffeine, but there also could be some additional bioactives or byproducts that come from those plants. And that can be a positive or a negative. And I think we really need to think about that and not just automatically assume that natural is better, that if it's natural, it's good for me. I used to joke with clients, like, cocaine is natural too, comes from a plant, doesn't necessarily mean we should embrace it and use it, right? So just because something has this natural moniker to it, we shouldn't all of a sudden think it's good for us, and that's the version that we should take. Sticking with this example about creatine, synthetic creatine is really the only way we're going to do it. Like, what else are we going to do? We're going to start taking beef and extracting the creatine from it and then purifying it down so we can have natural creatine? Like, that just doesn't make sense. It would be extremely wasteful. And so sometimes the synthetic route is the way to go. With the example with caffeine, there is literally no difference between naturally extracted caffeine or chemically synthetic caffeine. So caffeine that's made in the lab, caffeine that's extracted from coffee, tea, or cacao, right? Literally no difference. Totally the same. The natural caffeine actually might be more expensive because it could take more effort. So we really need to start thinking about that. Is the natural form really going to make a difference? So we need to consider upsides and downsides of this natural and unnatural. So one of the upsides is if you look at something like whey protein, right? So whey protein is one of the best or highest quality sources of essential amino acids. It's great. Now, whey protein is one of the two proteins, the other one being casein, that's found in milk, right? It's one of the two milk proteins. And so what's going to happen is whey protein is going to get extracted from milk, from different whatever dairy products, whatever process is used. It's a byproduct of a lot of dairy processes. So you get this whey protein. But what's also really cool is you get these other bioactives. So the amino acids come together in different peptides. So peptides, think of protein. This is a great analogy that I always use. Protein is like a necklace, and the amino acids are the beads on a necklace, right? Different colored beads connecting together for representing different amino acids. They all come together in a string to make the necklace. So that's amino acids and protein. Now you have this other thing called peptides. Peptides are basically one or two or three shorter chains, so amino acids that are together, but only in these little pieces, so kind of little bits of the necklace. And what's really interesting is there are different kinds of peptides depending on where you're going to get the protein from. And what research has really shown over decades is that there are specific peptides in milk protein, so like in whey and in casein, that have additional extra bioactive activity. So when you consume them, they don't get fully broken down into just the singular amino acids, but the body will actually take them up. And some of these peptides can help support immune function. Some of them can also help support lower blood pressure, right? So there are these cool additive effects that you can get from products if they're sourced all naturally. So the flip side of the protein example would be if you had an essential amino acid drink, right? So you got all the same amino acids that you would get in whey protein, but they were all singular. You wouldn't get that benefit of however Mother Nature decided to put together those peptides to have those additional bioactive effects. You wouldn't get that benefit with essential amino acids. The other downside to essential amino acids is they taste disgusting. I don't know why you would say here's like the holy grail of amino acids, right? The essential amino acids. These are the things you want. Now we're going to make them taste as gross as humanly possible. I don't know how in the cosmos when things were getting lined up, I don't know how amino acids pulled the let's be disgusting card. But essential amino acids they're really bitter and they just have a horrible taste. So they actually do require a lot of flavoring, a lot of sweetening, whether that's artificial or not. Like a lot of, in the industry, they call them flavor systems to try to mask that. Whereas if you just consume something like whey protein, like you can get all those same amino acids, but they're kind of in chains and in smaller chains, and the taste is totally fine, right? And so that's, this difference, synthetic versus natural from a protein standpoint. I really think when you get protein from these natural sources, that there's value adds and there's also taste benefits that you're just not going to get from necessarily the synthetic side. I mean, like a ribeye tastes exponentially better than any essential amino acid drink you're ever going to find, right? So in that case, with protein, I think trying to find the more natural protein sources is the way to go. But it's not always. There can be downsides to the natural thing. So there was an article in the New England Journal of Medicine, right? And it was 2002, and it was about mercury, fish, and heart attacks. And so basically, when I was a graduate student, I started graduate school, I want to say fall of 2005, maybe. It was a while ago, which is a while ago now. So maybe fall 2005, 2006, somewhere around there. And probably beginning of my second year, maybe halfway through my second year, you basically spend your first year, at least I did, first year graduate school, like kind of doing all the odd jobs around the lab, like filling in with other people's studies, helping getting up in the morning and deal with subjects and blood draws and all these other things. And you read a ton. You still have a high course load, so I was still taking a lot of classes and reading a lot of research papers. So I had a degree in biochemistry. Like I didn't have a degree in nutrition. I had taken, before going to Penn State, I had gone, as many of you know, if you watch the show a lot, I went to medical school at the University of Vermont for about a year or so, then left, managed a biochemistry lab, and during that time I took some formal nutrition classes. But essentially my nutrition education was all self-taught through research papers and reading and things like that. And so when I went to graduate school, that just leveled it up even more, especially because I was working in the cardiovascular space. So reading tons and tons of papers. And so what I kind of realized is that there were these core, it's probably about 15 different research papers, which I considered landmark papers, that if you're going to go get your PhD in nutrition, like, you should read these papers. So it was DASH Diet, it was the Omni Heart Study, it was a Women's Health Initiative. Like, there were all these really, really good papers that you just, one, you need to know that research, and two, the research paper, it taught you something about thinking or about nutritional science. So I put together this binder, and every time we got a new graduate student, I would give them the binder. And it was like, look, if you're going to be in the lab, you need to know about all these things, right? Because it was just that everyone needed to know these core research papers. One of these research papers was this one from the New England Journal of Medicine that was about mercury, fish, and heart attacks. And it also kind of, if I remember correctly, in the end, delved a little bit into pregnancy, because what the paper was trying to, or what the authors of the paper were trying to tease out is the benefit of eating fish, did that outweigh the mercury exposure that you also have when you consume fish? And in the end, they concluded that, the health benefits of the omega-3 fatty acids found in fish far outweighed, that mercury risk. But it was this really great analysis that was looking at this cost benefit of this amazing thing that's found in fatty fish, these omega-3 fatty acids, those long chain ones, EPA and DHA, versus this, heavy metal that's essentially the cost of doing business for a fish, right? Because they're in the ocean and they're consuming things. And so the heavy metals are there. And so if you as a person are going to eat those omega-3s, is it still good for you to eat that fish to get that benefit? Then I think, and so the authors concluded yes, and I think yes. And if you look at the fish, one of the very first articles actually that I wrote for T Nation, which was, I think it was the first article I ever had published in it was a major online publication. And back in, then, whenever it was, a long time ago, 2004, it was, that was like the publication too. But it was about tuna fish and mercury, because it was a bodybuilding publication, and a lot of bodybuilders eat a lot of tuna fish. As a college student, it was cheap. I ate tuna fish literally by the can, right? And so, but it was looking at that mercury exposure. It's like, well, here's a great cheap protein, but then you're going to get exposed to mercury. At what point does it become a problem? So back to this New England Journal of Medicine paper. So why I like this one so much is it did show that, well, here's this natural, you're getting omega-3s naturally, right? But there is that risk to it. And then so you say, well, I'm going to get omega-3s in a supplement form, which is generally still natural, right? They're getting them from, it's not often salmon. Sometimes it's cod, but you'll get cod liver oil. It's usually smaller fish. And they're going to concentrate, and then they're going to purify those omega-3s to get out the heavy metals. So in that case, the supplement route, while still technically natural, undergoes some additional processing to really pull out those heavy metals. And there are some third-party certifications that used to be really prominent a long time ago. They're still there, but the molecular distillation techniques, like the techniques that are used to purify fish oils, are so much better and so much more ubiquitous. Nowadays, that if you're going to get a fish oil supplement, and I thought I had one around here that I could show you, but I don't. You look at the back label, it'll say like total fat, like in one capsule. And if that's usually 1 gram, that's kind of a standard capsule size. And if the EPA and DHA that is in that one capsule is about 50% of the total, so you're going to have 500 milligrams in a 1,000 milligram tablet, that if you're going to have that, chances that's a good sign that it's molecular distilled. There used to be a lot more really inexpensive fish oil on the market, which was about 30% pure. So the EPA and DHA was only added out to about 300 milligrams. And if you were consuming that fish oil, it just wasn't purified enough that you were going to be opening yourself up potentially to these other heavy metals. But, what we could do is you take it one step further, and let's say you're pregnant or nursing, and you really are trying to minimize any sort of heavy metal exposure. So then what you could do is you could get a DHA supplement that comes from algae. and you're not going to have that kind of that worry of the heavy metals. So in all of these instances, this product, omega-3s that you're eating from salmon, molecularly distilled fish oil supplement, or DHA supplement from algae, they're all natural, right? But they all kind of have their pluses and minuses. You're probably thinking, well, what's the minus of the DHA algae supplement? One, it's just DHA, right? And so you don't get EPA. Your total amount of omega-3s is going to be a lot less, and it's pretty expensive. So if you really wanted to get in 1 to 2 grams of EPA or DHA, in that case it would be just DHA. It's got a lot of capsules, and it's going to be kind of probably cost prohibitive. So the point here is, when you're thinking natural versus synthetic, that you should ask yourself and look a little bit further. I mean, if this is something that you're going to be consistently putting into your body, right, it's worth taking the time of saying, is this a benefit that I go the natural route or go the synthetic route? In that same survey that I told you about at the beginning, where people were essentially 50% of people didn't know if it was better or worse, and the other 50% were split 25-25 on it is better versus it's not. Only 4 out of 10 people said they would pay more for a natural source of caffeine versus a synthetic source of caffeine. And generally what you're going to find is when people are touting, or companies are touting, natural caffeine, it's probably going to be a little bit more expensive. It's probably going to be a little bit more expensive. So those are the things that you just kind of need to think about. And really what I'd like to do with this show is just challenge you, when you see that natural label or you see that natural marketing call out, I want you to ask yourself, like, does this matter? Or like, should this be? Or you're like, of course this should be natural, right? Or does this even matter? And then is it worth the added price? And yeah, if you're at a convenience store and it's a one-off grab, you're not going to have this deep conversation with yourself about, should you get the Bang energy drink with synthetic caffeine, or whatever energy drink is next to it with all natural caffeine. Like, you're not going to have that conversation. But if it's a supplement that you're going to take on a regular basis, or something that you purchase regularly at the store, don't automatically just get sucked into whatever the marketing is saying. Like, ask yourself those questions, kind of the questions that we've been talking about. And if something comes up and you're wondering, is this product better natural or not, or does it matter? Is there a synthetic version? Just find me on social, post a comment on the show notes page here, reach out and contact us at microcell.com. I'm always happy to help people navigate these sort of things. So that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the Dr. Mike Show. I want to encourage everybody, if you haven't already, check out, you want to go to substancenutrition.com. It's the rebranding. It formerly used to be getneurocoffee.com. Go to substancenutrition.com and check out Synthesis. It's the new protein powder. It's a blend. I was talking about whey protein and casein protein earlier. It's a blend of whey protein isolate, this highly purified quality whey protein with best-in-class casein, which is that slower digesting micellular casein. It's a great product. It's not overly sweetened or not overly flavored, so you still get that natural taste of the whey and of the casein. It's really good. People are loving it. We launched it 1st of July. So if you haven't tried it, go check that out. And then also, if you're listening to this show kind of shortly after it comes out, I also want to let you know that we're going to be launching a new minimally processed food challenge, the first right after Labor Day. I think it's September 5th. And so you're going to be able to register for the minimally processed food challenge the week before. But if you go to minimallyprocessedfood.com, that's minimallyprocessedfood.com, you can read all about the 30-day challenge, and you can also sign up for the pre-registration pre-launch list, so that when we're ready to enroll people, you can sign up. Because we're just doing this one enrollment in the fall, and then we're going to do one in between Thanksgiving and the beginning of the year, in between Thanksgiving and Christmas. So if you want to get in on now, really jumpstart your fall, start paying attention to what's in your food, why are you eating your food, and start eating actually more food that makes you more full and satisfied and have a little bit more control over your diet, the Minimally Processed Food Challenge is really the way to go. I beta tested it last year. It was around the end of the year, and it was great. People loved it. We've upgraded the challenge some. And for everybody who completes the challenge, which is not exclusively eating minimally processed food, but just working through and going through all the lessons, have a really special prize for you guys at the end. So you want to go to minimallyprocessedfood.com, read all about the challenge, sign up, get on the pre-launch list so you can join in when we launch shortly after Labor Day. All right, we'll see you guys next week. Have a good one.